I spent $44,000 to fly my family to my wedding, but my parents used it for a Europe trip instead. I'm Gavin, 38, and I'd saved 5 years to give my family the wedding of a lifetime. But 2 weeks before the flight, my parents called. We used the money. Your sister needed Europe. I stood in a half-decorated chapel, holding a seating chart they never planned to use. The air smelled like wilted roses, and rain, like something sacred had gone sour. If you've ever paid the bill for someone else's silence, tell me where you're listening from. The cursor blinked on my screen like it was waiting for a better man to make the call. $44,173.20. I stared at the number until it stopped looking like money. It just looked like a mistake I hadn't made yet. From the kitchen, Emily leaned around the corner, still in her robe, holding 2 mugs by their handles. "You sure about this?" she asked. I wasn't. But I said, "Yeah," and clicked send. A tiny chime sounded, too cheerful for the moment. The wire transfer was confirmed. And just like that, my biggest act of goodwill disappeared into the ether, toward people who might never mention it again. The apartment smelled like fresh coffee and burned toast. Light from the early Chicago sun crept through the blinds, cutting sharp lines across our tiny living room. I sat back in my chair, hand still on the keyboard. Emily set the mug down next to me. No cream. She remembered that part at least. Our wedding was 3 months away. Hawaii. Big island. I'd picked a resort with the clearest views of the ocean I'd ever seen on a travel brochure. I wanted the people who mattered most to have front row seats to the start of my next chapter. My family. My parents. My sister Lindsay and her 2 teenage sons. A total of 10 people. First-class flights, beachfront villas, ground transport, all inclusive. "I just don't want you to be disappointed," Emily said gently, sitting across from me. "They raised me," I said. "I just want them to be proud of who I became. You know?" She tilted her head. "You think this will do it?" "I don't know. Maybe. It's not about the money." But it kind of was. I'd spent years building the kind of life I thought they'd finally recognize. Steady job, no debt, a partner who loved me and wasn't just convenient at holidays. Still, I'd never been the one they bragged about at church or mentioned first in Christmas letters. That spot was reserved for Lindsay, the responsible one, the selfless mom, the one who stayed nearby. I clicked open the PDF of the flight itinerary I'd created. Emily had helped me triple-check every date, every name, every connection. I even booked Dad a reclining seat he once mentioned liking on Delta. I sent the file to both my parents. No reply. By dinner that night, I checked again. Nothing. The next morning, still nothing. 3 days later, I got a single-line email from Dad. "We'll confirm next week. Lindsay's checking another option." That was it. No, thanks. No, wow, this is incredible. Just a vague suggestion that there might be another way. Emily sat beside me as I read it aloud. She didn't say anything at first, just squeezed my hand once, then stood to refill her coffee. Her silence was louder than mine. I knew the tone of Dad's message too well. It was the same one he used when I tried to explain what I did for a living. The same calm, polished detachment. Not warm, not cruel. Just curated distance. Just enough courtesy to make me feel guilty for expecting more. "They're just busy," I told myself. "It's still early." Still, I printed the full travel dossier, airfare invoices, hotel confirmations, even the seafood menu options, and clipped it into a manila folder labeled Wedding, Family Guests. I placed it carefully on the corner of my desk, beneath the framed photo of me and Dad from my college graduation. I hadn't opened it since. Maybe this would be the moment they'd show up. Really show up. Not just physically, but the way I'd always imagined. Smiling, present, proud. A family, together. No sidelong glances, no half-hearted nods, just real connection. A do-over for the kid who always felt a step outside the circle. That folder sat there for days. Open to page 1. Flights, $14,200. Emily never asked to move it. Neither did I. Then, a week later, I was scrolling Instagram while waiting in line at the grocery store. A photo popped up at the top of my feed. My sister Lindsay, with her perfect hair and that curated hashtag style she always used. The caption read, "Countdown to Paris begins." Tag, at Mom Moore. Tag, at Dad. Moore, location, Charles de Gaulle Airport. I didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. The oranges in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. They'd made a different choice. I stared at Lindsay's photo for a long time. It was framed perfectly. She always had a knack for angles. Eiffel Tower in the background. Mom and Dad leaning into her like they were on a magazine shoot. Everyone smiling. Everyone relaxed. I zoomed in once, then again, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I tapped Dad's number and hit call. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, son," he said, casual like I'd just asked him to bring in the trash cans. "I thought we agreed on Hawaii." There was a pause, then the sigh. You know the kind. It wasn't exhaustion. It was performance. A signal that he was about to be the reasonable one. "Lindsay's been through a lot this year," he said. "We figured she could use the break." "With the money I sent?" I asked. Another pause. More silence than space between us now. "Gavin," he said, calm as a sermon, "don't make this about money." I swallowed once. The back of my throat felt tight. "Then what is this about?" He didn't answer. Just said, "We'll talk soon," and hung up. That was 2 months before the wedding. We were finalizing vendor payments and head counts. Emily had her sticky notes all over the fridge. Pink for catering, blue for rentals, yellow for people who hadn't RSVP'd. My parents' names had no sticky at all. Just a line drawn with a pencil and a small dash next to it. I kept checking the guest list app. 2 names stayed in pending, every time. They'd said they wanted to be there, at least in the beginning. Mom had even asked about the flower arrangements once, said something about preferring peonies over roses. I remember thinking, she's finally trying. Then the questions stopped. Now, they weren't even questions, just absence. Emily tried to fill the space. She sent photos of centerpiece options to the family group chat, suggested playlists for the reception dinner, invited them to our Zoom with the officiant. No one replied. Not once. I remember watching her eyes dim a little each time she checked her phone and saw nothing new. Then, a message finally came through, just not to her. Mom texted me directly. "We're not sure Europe will wrap in time. We'll let you know closer to the date." I read it twice, then a third time. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone resting on my knee like it might buzz again. But that was it. 1 sentence, punctuated like a grocery list note. Emily walked in, holding a folder labeled DJ Set Lists. She smiled when she saw me, but it faded quickly. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, just thinking through the ceremony again. She sat beside me, folding one leg under the other. "You think we'll need to change the head count again?" "Probably." She didn't ask more, didn't press, just took my hand and leaned her head on my shoulder. The silence between us was the kind that only happens when love is trying not to hurt. That night, I practiced smiling in the mirror. I'd been told to work on my genuine reaction for photos. The photographer we hired said, "Candids always came out better when you warmed up your face first." So I tried. Big smile, relax the eyebrows, tilt the chin just a little, but the corners of my mouth felt heavy. I opened my phone again, read Mom's message once more, then I deleted it. Didn't tell Emily. Didn't tell anyone. Instead, I turned off the guest list notifications and muted the group chat entirely. The next morning, we met the florist at a small studio in West Loop. It smelled like lilacs and coffee. The woman, her name was Joan, walked us through options with soft-voiced patience. At one point, while we were choosing between aisle runners, she asked, "So, are your parents walking you down the aisle?" The question landed like a drop of water in an empty bowl. I didn't even blink, just looked at the stems in her hand and said, "I don't think they're walking anywhere near me." She nodded slowly. "We'll go with eucalyptus then. It stands well alone." We finished our meeting, paid the deposit, and stepped outside into a cloudless sky. For a moment, I thought about calling them again, but I didn't. The numbers were fine. That was the part that irritated me the most. Everything in the quarterly dashboard checked out. Green bars, clean lines, projections aligned. The work was doing what it was supposed to do. But the screen in front of me blurred until it wasn't projections anymore. It was the floor plan for our reception. Table 12, 10 seats. Only 6 confirmed. I clicked again. And again. But the names didn't change. "Hey." Nate's voice broke through. He leaned over the divider between our desks, coffee in hand. "You okay, man?" I blinked. "Yeah, just thinking through a few details." He sat back. "Wedding stuff. Something like that. You flying anyone in?" "Yeah," I said, then paused. Or I was. I don't know anymore. Nate gave a sympathetic half-smile, the kind that says, "I won't push if you don't offer." I didn't offer. Instead, I logged out and walked to the break room. The humming of the refrigerator filled the silence like it had something important to say. When I got home, Emily was in the bedroom, surrounded by fabric samples. Light streamed through the blinds in soft strips across the wall. She looked up when I came in. "You eat?" "Not really." She studied me, not with suspicion, but with that kind of worried patience she'd always had. The kind I didn't deserve. Later, she found me sitting in the living room. No lights. Just me, the dark, and my own thoughts, each louder than the last. "I'm not mad at them," I said, not looking up. "I know," she replied gently, "but you're disappearing for them." I didn't argue. I couldn't. That night, I opened my laptop, not to check the seating chart this time, but to go over the travel confirmations again. Every room had been booked under my name, every expense charged to the same card. Then I noticed something off. One hotel confirmation had been canceled. I clicked through the agency portal. The reservation for my parents' suite at the Mauna Kea resort had been rerouted to a different account. New reservation. New dates. Different location entirely. I clicked on the transaction ID. Dad's name was on the refund request. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My chest felt tight. "I prepaid because I trusted them," I said aloud, though no one was there. Like an idiot. Emily came into the room, saw the screen, and froze. "Oh my God. I wired that money weeks ago," I muttered. "You didn't even make them confirm," she whispered. "You just gave it." "I thought they'd want to be there." Emily sat beside me. Her hand touched mine. "We need to talk to the planner. Cut back on the guest expectations." I didn't answer. I just nodded. Not because she was right, but because I couldn't handle the idea of being wrong again. The next day we met with the planner. We swapped the 3-table head count for 2, cut the beachfront welcome dinner to a smaller cocktail hour, adjusted the photo booth hours. I told myself this was practical, smart, controlled, but it felt like folding something precious just to make it fit inside a smaller box. When we got home, A small envelope was waiting in the mail slot. No return address. I recognized the print, though. It was our wedding invite. Inside, the envelope was untouched, still sealed. But now, on the front, in red ink, it said, "Return to sender." Not at this address. My parents' address hadn't changed in 20 years. I held the envelope like it might melt. Emily stood quietly behind me, reading over my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words, heavier than most novels. I walked into the study and opened the top drawer of my desk. Beneath the wedding receipts and seating plans was an old yearbook. I hadn't looked at it in ages. But there it was. Page 73. The photo of me in cap and gown, mid-handshake with the university president. And behind the rope line, 2 smiling faces. Dad's hand on my shoulder. Mom's mouth mid-cheer. That was the last time I remembered them looking proud. We sat cross-legged on the bed, the RSVP list between us like a deck of fragile cards. Each yes brought a flicker of relief, followed by the dull weight of the names still missing. Emily tapped her pen against the margin. "So, your cousin Lyle's a definite?" "Yeah," I said. "He even booked his own room. Said he wanted to be there. No strings attached." She looked up at me. "What if they don't come, Gavin?" I didn't answer right away. Outside, the waves folded over each other, calm and repetitive, as if nothing urgent was happening in the world. The ocean didn't care about RSVP deadlines or family silences. I looked at her. Then we finally know the truth. The next morning, we met the planner for a venue walkthrough. The resort staff had set out the sample table arrangements on the lawn, the ocean behind them painted in soft blues and gold. It should have felt magical. Instead, it felt cautious. "It's rare," the planner said as she adjusted a floral centerpiece, "to see this many reservations made by the groom's side. Usually, it's the bride's family who fills out the guest list." Emily smiled politely. I just nodded. I didn't explain that most of my family hadn't reserved anything, because most of them weren't coming, or hadn't said anything at all. I didn't explain that I was still pretending to believe in possibilities that were already dead. Back in the hotel room, my phone buzzed. Aunt Ellie. I hesitated, then answered. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "I just wanted to say I got the itinerary. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I swallowed. "Thanks, Aunt Ellie. That means more than I can say. I know they've made this harder than it had to be," she added quietly. "But not everyone's like them. Some of us are proud of you. Always have been." I didn't cry, but I did stop pacing. That afternoon, I returned to the guest list app. There were still 2 names in pending. Not no, just not answered, as if absence could be softened by ambiguity. I scrolled to the seating chart. Family row, left side. 2 chairs, both labeled reserved. And for the first time since we began planning this wedding, I removed them. Quietly. Without fanfare. Without even telling Emily. It wasn't anger that guided me, just clarity. Those seats weren't being held out of love. They were being held out of habit. When I closed the laptop, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't joy, but it was something close to relief. The next morning, the florist came in for a consultation. She walked through the arrangement samples while Emily flipped through color swatches. I mostly stayed quiet, offering a nod here and there. Then she asked casually, "And your parents? Will they be walking you down the aisle?" Emily looked at me, unsure whether to answer. I smiled, just barely. "I don't think they're walking anywhere near me." The room went quiet for a beat longer than it should have. Then the florist nodded and returned to her clipboard. That night, after dinner, I opened the nightstand drawer and saw them again. The cufflinks. Silver. Understated. Engraved with his initials. I'd bought them 2 months ago, when I still believed this wedding might be a bridge, instead of a final line. They were still in their box, still pristine. I didn't touch them, just closed the drawer. Then my phone lit up. Group text from Lindsay. "We'll be in Santorini that week. Hope the wedding goes okay." 3 people tagged. Lindsay, Mom, Dad. The sea outside crashed a little louder against the shore. The sun had started dipping low over the Pacific as we gathered by the wooden archway, where tomorrow's vows would be spoken. Emily looked radiant in a soft blue dress, the kind she'd picked for the rehearsal dinner. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands catching the gold of the dying light. I stood next to her, nodding as the planner walked us through aisle placements, music cues, where to pause, when to smile. Then she pointed toward the front row. "That one's for your father, right?" she asked, almost as an afterthought. I glanced at the seat. Pale linen, small white flower tied to the back. Empty, like it had been waiting for that question all day. Uncle Ray walked up behind me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Still no word from your folks?" I didn't look at him, just adjusted the cuff of my sleeve. "They'll do what they do," I said quietly. A few yards away, Aunt Ellie was helping the flower girl adjust her crown. Cousin Jacob was cracking jokes with the officiant. The photographer snapped a few candids, laughter, motion, life. But that seat, it anchored me in place. Emily walked over, her voice low. "You want to keep the seat?" I hesitated, then shook my head. Number let someone who showed up sit there. Later, while the others took a break by the refreshment table, I walked up to the planner and motioned toward both seats in the family row. "Can we just remove them?" I asked. She blinked. "Of course. Want me to replace them with anything?" "No," I said. "Just leave the space open." She nodded gently, like she understood more than she let on. I watched her untie the ribbons and quietly slide the chairs away. The breeze carried the faint scent of sea salt and gardenia. For a long time, I stood there looking at that space, no longer waiting for someone to fill it. Not empty. Just open. That was the first moment I felt something like peace. Not because they stayed away, because I finally stopped hoping they'd change. The rest of the rehearsal flowed with surprising ease. We walked through the processional twice. The ring bearer tripped once and made everyone laugh. Emily's brother mispronounced a line in the script and turned red from the ears down. People smiled, the kind of smiles that come from being truly present. As we took our seats for dinner under the twinkle lights, Aunt Ellie came over, a paper fan fluttering in her hand. "Mind if I sit up front tomorrow?" she asked. "You don't even have to ask," I said. She squeezed my hand. "You did good, kid, no matter what anyone else says." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Later that night, back in the hotel room, I opened the drawer and stared at the silver cufflinks again. Still in their box, still untouched. They weren't just cufflinks anymore. They were a story I no longer wanted to carry. I closed the box, stood up, and placed it gently in the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Then I closed it. I wasn't bringing them tomorrow. I wasn't bringing the past with me either. Emily came out of the bathroom, barefoot, toweling her hair. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I really am." We lay in bed, quiet except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the kind of quiet that didn't feel lonely anymore. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Family group chat. I opened it. A photo. My parents, raising glasses in front of some palatial terrace. Lake Como in the background, wine in hand, sun hitting the marble like something out of a travel magazine. The caption read, "Cheers from Lake Como." They were smiling. So were we, just in different hemispheres now. The lights above the long table twinkled like a second layer of stars. Soft string lights swayed above us, their warm yellow glow catching in the silverware and wine glasses. Waves rolled in slow behind the open terrace of the beachside restaurant, as if the ocean had agreed to quiet down just for this night. 30 people had gathered. Laughter floated up from one end of the table, where the groomsmen were reenacting some story from college. Emily's parents chatted with her high school friend over glasses of sangria. My best man, Greg, had commandeered the playlist, and somehow there was already dancing before dessert. It should have felt like everything I ever wanted. And in some ways, it did. Except for the 2 seats still empty near the center of the table. I hadn't put name cards on them. Just a single white flower resting on the plate of the one meant for my father. A small peace offering the world would never see. I held my glass, standing. Emily noticed, and gently tapped her knife against the side of hers. The clinking echoed down the table. One by one, the room quieted. Aunt Ellie lowered her fan. Greg straightened in his seat. Even the waitstaff paused near the bar, sensing something was coming. I took a breath. "I'm not great with speeches," I said, which was a lie. I give data briefings for a living. But I've been thinking a lot about silence. A few nods. Some guests leaned in. I used to think silence meant disapproval, I continued. That if people didn't show up or didn't reply, it was because I hadn't earned it. Because I hadn't done enough, said enough, proved enough. I looked at Emily. But lately, I think silence just means absence. And absence, I've learned, can be a choice. There was a soft shift in the room, like people collectively exhaled. "I want to thank everyone who made the choice to be here," I said. "Who flew across oceans, rescheduled meetings, left kids with babysitters, took vacation time, even when it was inconvenient." I glanced down the table. To Aunt Ellie, who always believed I had good in me, even when I didn't. She teared up and waved her hand as if to say, "Oh, stop." To Nate, who reminded me that you can be a friend without asking for anything in return. Nate smiled, lifted his glass. To Greg, who once tackled a flaming trash can in my dorm hallway because I said I didn't know what ride or die meant. Laughter, a few whistles. Greg saluted. And to Emily, who didn't just choose me, she built something with me. I raised my glass higher. To everyone who flew across the ocean for love, and to everyone who stayed home, may they find theirs too. A pause, then applause. Not the kind of applause that fills stadiums, the kind that fills a heart. People stood. Glasses clinked. Someone let out a low whistle. I sat down and didn't cry. I just felt light, like something had been unhooked from me, a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying until it left. The rest of the night blurred in the best way. Dancing under lights. Emily barefoot on the patio, spinning with her little cousin. Greg doing his usual wedding antics. The robot, followed by something resembling a poorly executed moonwalk. People hugging, laughing, leaning in to tell each other things they might forget in the morning, but meant every word of in that moment. I let myself laugh. Fully. I'd let myself be in it. Not watching from a distance, not waiting for a message or a notification or an apology that would never come. Just there. Present. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the music softened to a mellow background hum, I stepped outside. The night had gone still. The sky was deep navy now, moon tucked behind a slow-moving cloud. The air smelled like salt and vanilla from the tiki candles burning low. I didn't hear her footsteps, but I felt her presence. Emily leaned into my shoulder. "You did it," she said. I looked out at the waves. "Yeah," I whispered. "Now, let's go get married." The tie sat uneven across my collarbone. I'd redone the knot 3 times now, each time pulling it loose again like it was trying to choke a thought I hadn't yet named. Outside, The surf kept crashing in rhythmic indifference, the kind of waves tourists call calming. But today, they felt loud. Too loud. I stared at myself in the mirror of the wedding suite, unsure if I looked like a groom or someone pretending to be one. My phone buzzed on the countertop beside a travel-sized bottle of aftershave and an untouched pair of silver cufflinks. I didn't reach for it at first. Then I did. "Lindsay, you'll be fine. Don't be dramatic." I read the message twice. Somehow it still stung, even after all these weeks of silence. "Thanks for the family pep talk," I muttered. The door creaked behind me. Emily stepped in, barefoot, hair pinned but unfinished. No makeup yet. Just her. "I'm not nervous," I said, a little too quickly. "You don't have to be," she replied. "You already did the hardest part." She crossed the room, reached up, and tugged the tie straight with a gentle tug. The fourth knot held. We stood there in the quiet for a beat. No one rushing. No one pretending. "See you at the altar?" she asked. I nodded. She leaned up and kissed my cheek. And then she left. I sat down with the vows I hadn't touched in 2 days. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because the part of me that used to write for their ears was finally quiet. I read them once to myself before folding the paper and slipping it into my jacket pocket. "Dear Gavin," I thought. Say it like no one's watching. Especially not them. The ceremony took place beneath a simple white arch overlooking the Pacific. Chairs lined the sand in 2 neat rows, filled with faces that had flown thousands of miles just to be here. Aunt Ellie wore a deep blue dress and held a tissue like it was a prop she'd rehearsed with. Greg gave me a nod as I walked in, hands steady, steps slow. I didn't look for them. Not anymore. Emily walked down the aisle with her uncle, the wind pulling at her veil like it wanted to show her off to the sky. And when she reached me, everything else dropped away. We stood hand in hand, and when the officiant gave me the cue, I took out the folded paper. I unfolded it, but I didn't look at it. I used to think love was something you had to earn, I began. That if you worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, sacrificed just enough, eventually someone would say, "You belong here." A hush fell across the crowd. Even the waves seemed to pause. But I've learned that love isn't a reward. It's a place. And it's not something you win. It's something you build. I turned to Emily. "With you, I don't have to ask for space. I'm already in it." I took a breath. "I forgive myself," I said. "For the years I spent trying to earn love from people who only knew how to measure it." Emily's eyes welled. "So today, I vow not just to love you, but to live in that love, without shrinking, without apology, without asking again." A sound, half sob, half sigh, came from somewhere behind us. The officiant smiled. "And now the rings?" Emily's vows were softer, but just as steady. She spoke of knowing and being known, of all the quiet mornings to come. And then, we were pronounced. The crowd rose. Applause scattered like wind-blown confetti. We kissed. And just like that, the part of me that had been holding its breath for months finally exhaled. That night, as the party moved indoors and the dance floor began to fill with poorly coordinated joy, I slipped away for a moment. Back in the suite, I changed into a fresh shirt. My phone buzzed again. Still nothing from Mom. Still no missed call. Just one new message. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. "You'll regret this, Dad." No punctuation beyond that. No context. No warmth. I stared at the screen. And then, slowly, I powered the phone off. I placed it face down on the dresser beside the guest book. Someone had drawn a heart on the last page. Neat. Simple. Signed, E.M. Emily. Or my mother. I ran my thumb across the edge of the page, but I didn't need to know, not anymore. The waves were quieter now, not because they softened, but because we had. Emily and I walked barefoot along the shoreline just past midnight, where the lanterns from the reception still flickered behind us, like stars learning to breathe on land. She held my hand in one, and in the other, an envelope. It had been handed to us by Aunt Ellie, just as we were about to leave the reception. "No rush," she'd whispered. "But it's from Moira's estate. She left it for you both." I hadn't even known Grandma Moira kept a will. She'd passed 2 years ago, the kind of quiet departure that gets honored more in memory than in ceremony. We sat on a driftwood log, the kind worn smooth by salt and time. Emily ran her thumb along the edge of the flap. "You want to open it?" I nodded. She peeled the seal, careful not to tear it. Inside was a thin folded sheet of paper, and beneath it, a crisp, ivory-colored document that read, "Deed of Property, Door County, Wisconsin." My mouth went dry. Emily unfolded the note. Her voice trembled only slightly. "For your new beginning, the kind no one has to approve of. Love, Grandma Moira." I blinked. The sky spun a little. There was more, handwritten in careful cursive below. "Never spend your joy proving it to someone who won't hold it with you." I didn't speak. Couldn't. For a long moment, all I could do was stare at the signature, at the loops of her M, a handwriting I remembered from childhood birthday cards and fridge notes left when she'd house sit during summer. And then I cried. Not out of grief, but because, for the first time in months, maybe years, someone in my family had seen me. Not the job title, not the balance sheet, not the guilt-stained son trying to buy his way back to being worthy. Just me. Emily didn't speak. She just leaned her head against my shoulder. We sat there as the tide stretched close to our toes, and I imagined the little cottage up north. I hadn't been to Door County since I was 10. I remembered cherry pies and a crooked mailbox shaped like a loon. Grandma Moira had always said it wasn't much, but it's quiet, and it listens. I looked at Emily. "No resorts," I said. "No itinerary." She smiled. "Just us?" "Just us." Back in the suite, the wedding dress hung on the closet door, still shimmering with sand and dance floor laughter. I changed out of my shirt, finally placing the silver cufflinks into the nightstand drawer without a second thought. On the table, the deed sat next to the folded note. I placed my hand over it, flat, steady. And for the first time, the word home didn't feel like something someone else had to give me. It felt like something I could claim. The phone buzzed on the counter. One new message. "Dad, we'll talk when you come back. You still owe us the difference." No greeting. No signature. Just entitlement. Uninvited and still somehow loud. Emily glanced over. "Want me to delete it?" I shook my head. "Number let it stay. I need to remember what not to answer." She nodded. And with that, I turned the phone face down and climbed into bed beside the woman who chose me, not in spite of my family, but regardless of them. Outside, the ocean kept moving. And somewhere north, a small cottage waited with its porch light off but ready. The rain had started sometime around dawn. Not a storm, just a slow, insistent tap on the windows, like the house itself was remembering something. I sat at the kitchen table of the cottage Grandma Moira left us, still in sweatpants, still barefoot, with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. On my laptop screen was a folder I hadn't opened in weeks. Wedding expenses. Family. I don't know why I clicked on it. Maybe because there's something magnetic about pain you've organized. Something about turning emotional rejection into rows and columns that makes it feel rational, containable. I opened the spreadsheet. Airfare, outbound, $14,200. Hotel blocks, $17,400. Group dinners, $5,100. Rental vans, welcome baskets, ceremony fans with printed initials, even the champagne. Each row had a date, a note, a receipt scanned and labeled, and below it all, in a bolded final cell, total, $44,173.20. I laughed. Not loudly, just the short, bitter kind that rises from the throat like a cough you hoped would pass. Emily walked in, hair still damp from the shower, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She looked at the screen. "That the list?" "Yeah," I said. I itemized everything, even the champagne. "Why keep it?" I paused, not because I didn't know, but because I did. Because part of me thought I'd have to prove it someday. She sat across from me, reached for the mug, made a face. "You let this go cold." I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the final column. There was nothing else to add. No footnote. No refund pending. Just silence. That silence had cost more than the money. It had cost the mental spreadsheets I'd kept since I was 12. Every gesture tallied, every slight footnoted, every apology calculated in emotional tax. And still, they never paid. I hovered the cursor over the file, clicked once, pressed delete. The trash can icon popped up. "Are you sure you want to delete this permanently?" I clicked, yes. Just like that, it was gone. No more proof, no more ledgers, no more pretending that math could solve absence. If they wanted a receipt, I muttered, they should have shown up. Emily didn't say anything. She just took my hand, pressed it once, then stood and went back toward the bedroom. I opened a blank document. This time, not a spreadsheet, not a list, just a letter. Not to them, to me. I typed slowly, unsure where I was heading. The words weren't eloquent, but they were mine. "You didn't fail. You just kept showing up where no one opened the door." That was it. No signature, no date. I didn't need to send it anywhere. I just needed to write it. When I finished, I sat back and closed the laptop. The rain hadn't let up. I opened the window. The air smelled like wet pine and something clean. The kind of scent that doesn't ask for attention but earns it. I let the rain touch my skin, just for a second. It was cold. Sharp. Real. Behind me, the digital files were gone. The door to the past was finally shut. But the window, the one facing forward, that one I'd leave open. The package was already on the table when I came in from the porch. No return address, no markings. Just my name, G. Moore, written in block letters with a ballpoint pen. Emily raised an eyebrow. "You expecting something?" I shook my head. "Not unless Amazon started shipping disappointments in manila envelopes." I peeled the flap open. Inside, a thick stack of 4x6 photo prints. Lake Como, Santorini, the Louvre, one after another. Crystal clear, lavish, intentional. A handwritten note slipped out between two pictures. "We thought you'd want these. No signature, no warmth, just that quiet cruelty my parents had mastered. The kind that arrives looking like a gesture, but lands like a slap." Emily leaned over my shoulder. "They mailed you their vacation?" I didn't answer. I just flipped through the prints. There was Lindsay in a designer dress, posing on the marble steps of some Venetian palazzo. "That's the dress I paid for," I said. "Remember? She asked for it as a favor. Said it was for a friend's wedding. Emily didn't speak for a second. Then, they still think you're their wallet." I nodded. And then I laughed. Because it was absurd. All of it. The photos, the note, the pretense. They could cross oceans, fly business class, tour Paris, and still pretend we were one cohesive family unit. All on my dime. "They sent these like they were proud," I muttered. "Like I should be happy they used my love for Miles." I flipped to the last image, a blurry shot. Dad mid-toast, glass raised. Maybe to Lindsay, maybe to the Eiffel Tower, maybe to no one at all. I didn't care. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and tossed the whole stack in. The flame caught faster than I expected. For the first time, I didn't flinch. No second-guessing. No guilt. Just the soft crackle of paper surrendering. Emily watched me, arms folded. "You okay?" I nodded. "Not angry?" "Number, I'm just not theirs anymore." I knelt by the hearth once the flames died down. Most of the prints were ash, but one hadn't fully burned, the blurry one of Dad mid-toast. It stared back through the soot, grainy and gray, as if refusing to vanish. I let it be. That night, I opened my laptop. Settings, notifications, family group, mute all. Then social media, filters on posts, limited visibility, restricted tagging. No more drive-by reminders of what I wasn't invited to. This was the price of clarity. Small clicks, silent boundaries. I went to bed lighter, until the next morning. I opened my inbox and there it was. Subject, inheritance discussion. Zoom invite attached. No greeting, no explanation. Just a calendar link. I stared at it, then at the still glowing ashes in the fireplace. Maybe they were done with pretending too. Sunday morning came with a quiet drizzle and the smell of fresh pine through the window screens. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, one we found tucked away in the cottage's kitchen cabinets, and was halfway through buttering toast when Emily walked in, holding her phone. "Did you forget?" she asked gently. "Forget what?" She turned the screen toward me. 9:58 a.m. "The Zoom call, inheritance thing. You said you wanted closure." I stared at the clock. I had said that. Days ago, in a moment of calm. It didn't feel true anymore. Still, I nodded. I walked into the small study off the living room, closed the door behind me, and opened my laptop. The old machine took its time waking up. Just as I clicked the meeting link, the screen filled with a grid of familiar faces. Lindsay. Dad. Aunt Monica. Caleb. My cousin, who only reached out when money was involved. Their backgrounds varied. Office walls, kitchen counters, hotel lighting. No one said hi. Lindsay cleared her throat. "Glad you could join." Dad leaned closer to his webcam. "We figured it was best to keep this simple." I smiled thinly. "Simple like skipping your son's wedding?" Aunt Monica looked away. Caleb pretended to scroll something. Dad didn't blink. "We're here to talk about the house. Of course. Not the wedding. Not the silence. Just the house." Lindsay crossed her arms. "The Lake Geneva property. Grandma Moira's original estate. The trust says decisions require majority consensus among beneficiaries." "I'm not a beneficiary of that one," I said. "You made sure of it." Dad shrugged. "You got the cottage. You don't need more." I stared at him, my voice low. "You mean the cottage Grandma gave me because you wouldn't?" Silence again. Aunt Monica chimed in, like always the peacemaker. "Let's just focus on what's next, emotions aside." I clicked leave meeting without another word. The call window disappeared, just like that. No shaking, no tears, just a stillness I hadn't known I was capable of. I sat back, letting the quiet take up space. They came for what they thought they were owed. I showed up with what I built. I opened my email and typed, "Subject, Farnoy, Geneva Estate Discussion. Consider this my formal exit from the family group. Do what you need. I've already moved on." Gavin, I hit send. Then I opened the family folder on my desktop. Receipts, itineraries, email threads, scanned birthday cards, and dragged it into the trash. Empty trash? Yes. Emily knocked on the doorframe. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think I am." We sat together in the silence for a while. 10 minutes passed. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. Unknown number. I played it on speaker. Mom's voice. Soft, but clipped. You'll always regret this. We were just protecting you. We had to make choices for everyone, Gavin. You don't understand everything. But you will. One day. I paused it before it ended. Emily looked at me. You want to save that? No, I said. I deleted the voicemail, then turned off the phone completely. Outside, the rain had stopped. The trees gleamed, washed clean. Somewhere in the distance, gulls cried over the lake. I got up, stretched, and went back to the kitchen. A new day had started, and for once, it didn't begin with them. The kettle whistled softly in the background, and the trees outside the cottage window swayed with that early October grace. Fiery red and stubborn gold, shedding what they didn't need. Emily walked in wearing one of my old college hoodies, sleeves pushed up. In her hand, a slim leather book, its cover sun-warmed and slightly warped. Look what the florist found, she said, setting it on the table between us. It never got passed around. I stared at it. The guest book. I thought we'd lost it during the venue cleanup. Honestly, I hadn't looked for it. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, then sat across from me. Want to see? I opened the front cover. Blank. No names. No wishes. No, congrats you two, scribbled in shaky cursive or glitter pen ink. Just pages. Waiting. They didn't even need to say much, I muttered. Just show up. Emily slid a pen toward me. Then write what matters. I hesitated. Then I began. Not names, just flashes. Anchors. Ellie's laugh when she accidentally toasted with sparkling water. Knight making up a song on his ukulele during the cocktail hour. Greg's disastrous dance move that split his pants, and the cheer that followed. The way Emily looked walking down the aisle, like everything started over. The way I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because I was finally here. The pen didn't pause. The silence during the vows, not heavy. Sacred. The sound of the waves when I said, I do. The moment I realized I hadn't thought of them for almost 10 minutes straight. The flower Emily tucked behind my ear before the photos. The way the seat beside me stayed empty and didn't ache. I stopped on the 3rd page. Emily was watching quietly, hands wrapped around her mug. Maybe this book, I said, was never for them. She nodded. Nope, it's yours. I closed the book gently and walked to the bookshelf near the fireplace. On it, framed snapshots from that weekend, a beach pebble shaped like a heart. One of Grandma Moira's old quilts folded carefully across the bottom shelf. I placed the guest book right on top. Not tucked away. Not saved for later. Present. A new tradition. Should we add to it every year? Emily asked. I smiled. Only if we're still dancing in the kitchen by then. She raised her mug. Deal. Outside, the wind picked up. A few leaves skittered across the porch. I opened the book one last time, flipped to the final page. I pressed something between the sheets, a small, dried white flower, the one Emily had handed me before the ceremony, the one that never got pinned to anyone's lapel. I wrote the last line under it. I was there. I lived it. I didn't miss a thing. Then I closed the book, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely written in. The scent of roasted garlic filled the cottage, mixing with the faintest trace of rosemary and lemon. The kind of smell that wrapped itself around memories before they even formed. I set 2 plates on the table. Just 2. The other 4 sat stacked on the counter, untouched, but not forgotten. I'd once imagined this dinner differently. Same table, same lighting. But 6 chairs, 6 voices, 6 sets of forks clicking gently on ceramic as stories rolled through the room. Dad cutting into the roast too early. Lindsay giving unsolicited decor tips. Mom folding napkins with military precision and passive concern. But none of them had ever come. Not when we got engaged. Not when we moved. Not for the wedding. That dinner had lived in my head longer than it deserved. Now, it was just us. Emily walked in, drying her hands with a dish towel. "That smells amazing. What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "Just figured I'd cook for a full table. Habit, I guess." She glanced at the extra plates on the counter. "Planning for ghosts?" I chuckled. "Just seeing if I've really let go." We sat down as the cottage flickered with candlelight. No music. Just the sound of wind nudging the window panes and the quiet clink of silverware against bowls. Midway through dinner, I stood up and walked to the counter, picked up the other 4 plates, opened the old pine cabinet, the one with the uneven hinge that always made a soft groan, and put the plates back. No ceremony, no dramatics, just closure in motion. "Guess it's just us," I said. Emily raised her wine glass. No toast, just a small, knowing smile. We clinked and ate and didn't say much because we didn't have to. For years, I'd cooked for people who never showed up. Called, planned, bent my schedule, bent myself, hoping the table would feel full enough to mean something. But now the table was full. Not with noise, not with family, with presence, with us. Later that night, I stood at the sink rinsing dishes. My hands were warm, but my shoulders felt light, like I'd taken off something I didn't realize I was wearing. Emily dried the last plate. The cabinet creaked again as I reached to return it. That sound used to drive me nuts. Now it was grounding. Honest. The way old wood spoke when it moved. No secrets, no apologies. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Unknown number. But I knew the cadence of her messages too well. "Lindsay." I hit play. "Hey, it's me. We're selling Mom and Dad's house. Thought you should know. I'll send over the paperwork in case you want anything. Not that you'd answer. Anyway, it's happening." That was it. No greeting, no goodbye, no questions. I dried my hands slowly. They were selling the house where we spent Christmases, where Dad always burned the turkey, and Mom pretended it was just how he liked it, where I learned how to patch drywall, and where Lindsay learned how to disappear from responsibility, where Grandma once told me, "You don't have to keep paying to be welcome." And now, they were cashing it out. Part of me expected a twist, a condition, an offer that came with strings. But there was just a voicemail and a choice. I could ask for the family photos, or let them go. I looked around the cottage, at the shelf holding Moira's quilt, at the guest book with the pressed flower, at the empty wine glasses, at the chair across from mine, still warm. Maybe I didn't need anything from that house after all, because finally I'd built one. The sky over Fond du Lac was the same dull gray I remembered from every Thanksgiving morning growing up. A gray that made the evergreens look like they hadn't slept, and the pavement like it had something to confess. I turned the corner slowly. The engine barely hummed as I rolled down the cul-de-sac. There it was, the house on Glenwood Lane, same beige siding, same crooked mailbox with the peeling numbers. The porch light was off. Odd, since Mom always insisted it be left on in case someone comes by. The windows were bare now, stripped of their lace curtains and warmth. I parked across the street and let the car idle. Emily's voice came through the speakerphone. "You okay?" I stared ahead, hands loose on the wheel. Just looking at a house full of someone else's memories. The for sale sign tilted slightly in the lawn like it didn't want to be there either. Emily didn't say anything. She knew better than to rush this silence. I scanned the front of the house. The porch still had that cracked tile near the steps, the one I'd tripped over when I was 9, skinning my knee and dripping red on the welcome mat. Dad yelled about the blood. Mom wiped it up before checking the scrape. It hadn't been fixed. That felt telling. The windows upstairs were dark, except one, A faint shift of light. A curtain drawn back, then closed again. Probably a realtor. Or maybe Lindsay, tying up loose ends. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the envelope. Thick stock paper. Unsealed. Inside. One photo. A picture from our wedding. Emily and me, under the arch, Aunt Ellie decorated with eucalyptus and white roses. My eyes half laughing. Her hand on my chest. Light on our shoulders like we'd earned it. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled like damp leaves and distant firewood. Familiar, but not comforting. I crossed the street, didn't go up the steps, just slid the envelope into the mailbox. No note, no explanation, just proof. Proof I'd lived a life beyond those walls, that I'd loved and been loved, without their permission, that I'd stopped asking for space in their story and started writing my own. As I turned to go, I paused, one last glance, not at the windows, at the tile, still cracked, still waiting on someone who wouldn't fix it. I got in the car, deleted the address from my GPS favorites. A swipe, a beep. Gone. Halfway down the street, Emily spoke again. "You do what you needed to?" "Yeah," I said. Finally. That night, back in the cottage, I stood at the kitchen counter writing something in our guest book. The air smelled like cinnamon and clean linens. Emily was folding napkins for tomorrow's dinner. She glanced over. "We good?" I nodded, then reached for the dinner list on the fridge, took the pencil, added a name. She smiled. "Greg's mom?" "Yeah." She sent a card. Said she hoped we'd invite her next time. "She always liked you more than your own mom did." I laughed, gently. The kind that doesn't come from bitterness anymore, but from knowing something's behind you. Emily crossed the room and kissed my cheek. I looked around the kitchen. No cracked tiles, no silence laced with expectation, just warmth, and names on a list that meant something. The smell of cider and wood smoke hung in the crisp October air as we stepped into the old barn. Twinkle lights ran from beam to beam overhead, swaying slightly in the draft like they remembered summers past. It was our friend's 20th anniversary, potluck style, rustic, warm, the kind of gathering where coats were tossed over hay bales and kids ran barefoot until someone yelled, "Cake!" Emily leaned into me. "Glad we came?" I nodded, pulling her hand into mine. "Yeah, feels like the right place to be." We weren't hosting, but somehow it still felt like home. Maybe that's what happens when you stop waiting to be invited and start choosing where you belong. Halfway through dinner, a friend clinked a spoon to a glass. "All right, y'all. Speeches. You know the deal. Anyone got something to say? The mic's yours." I leaned back, comfortable just listening. Then I heard it. "Gavin, you're up." Laughter. Cheers. Someone passed me the mic. Emily touched my elbow. "You don't have to." But I did. Not because they needed it, because I did. I stood. The mic crackled, soft and uncertain, like it wasn't sure it was supposed to be turned on. I waited for the laughter to fade, looked around the barn. Then I smiled. I used to think family meant blood, a few nods, a clink of someone refilling their drink. Lately, it looks more like this. Laughter now, the easy kind. Heads nodding again. Familiar eyes catching mine in the glow of string lights. I've spent a lot of time this past year figuring out what it means to belong. Turns out, it's less about matching last names, and more about who helps you stack chairs when the party's over. A few people clapped. Aunt Ellie raised her glass without saying a word. I went on. "So tonight, I want to toast the ones who stay. The ones who carry folding chairs and refill pitchers and laugh at stories you've told 10 times already. More clapping. More light. To the ones who show up. You may not be in every photo frame I grew up with, but you're the reason we have new ones now." And just like that, it landed. Not heavy, not dramatic. Just true. The applause was warm, not loud, but full. When I sat down, Emily handed me my drink. "You okay?" "I am, now." We didn't stay for cake, just danced for a while. No formal song, just whatever shuffled next on someone's playlist. Her head on my chest, my hand steady at her back. No one filming, no one performing. Just being. Later, driving home, the sky a stretch of dark velvet and quiet headlights, Emily reached across and touched my knee. "If you had one thing to tell them now," she asked softly, "what would it be?" I didn't answer right away. Didn't need to. I just smiled, the kind that meant it's already been said. The mic may never reach them, but that was never the point. It reached me, and that was enough. Back at the cottage, the porch light flickered on as we pulled in, a familiar creak of the wood steps under our feet, the kind of sound you stop noticing once you start calling a place home. I set the empty glass I'd carried from the party on the windowsill. The mic crackled again in my mind, not because it was broken, but because sometimes static is just silence, turning into something worth saying. The snow came early that year. By mid-December, the pines behind the cottage were dipped in white, and the roof held the hush of thick powder, softening every sound, even the birds that hadn't yet left. I stood at the window, cradling a mug, the same one Emily bought from the antique shop the day after our wedding, cracked on the handle, but still held heat better than anything new. Outside, the mailbox creaked open in the wind. Empty. And that, for once, felt like peace. Inside, the cottage buzzed with the low thrum of voices. Not loud, not formal, just the warm noise of people who knew when to pass the salt and when to leave a story half-finished. Greg's mom was curled up on the couch beneath Grandma Moira's quilt, the one with the green stitching and slightly crooked corners. I'd always loved that it looked like someone made it with their sleeves rolled up. Greg, of course, was working his way through a second helping of sweet potato casserole. Emily leaned in. "You're staring." "I'm grateful," she smiled. "This isn't the family you lost. It's the one you made." I looked around the table. Mismatched chairs, a casserole dish from our neighbor Janine, the gravy boat that had survived 3 moves and 1 accidental drop. There was no assigned seating, no careful order. But every seat was full. Someone knocked their fork against their glass. I don't remember who. Maybe Nate, maybe Greg, it didn't matter. I stood, held up my drink, just cider this time. To the people who don't ask you to earn your seat at the table. Laughter. Real. A few claps. Greg even whistled. I added. And to the ones who carry chairs in from the porch when there aren't enough. The clapping turned into a toast. I sat down, the smile still on my face. Not forced, not strategic, just full. I used to think joy needed explanation, evidence, ledgers, spreadsheets, like love was a bank account I had to keep justifying. Turns out it just needs presence. And these people? They showed up. They didn't send invoices or critiques. They brought pie and asked if the seat near the window was taken. Later that evening, I threw another log on the fire. Greg's mom had drifted to sleep under the quilt, one hand resting on the faded patch with the stitched letter M. I didn't know if she noticed it, but something about that made it better. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "You're quiet. Thinking. About them?" I shook my head. "About this." She reached for my hand. "We made this, Gav." "I know." Silence again. Not cold, not bitter. Just enough. Before heading to bed, I stopped by the front door. The snow was still falling. Light now. Gentle. I checked the mailbox again, a habit I hadn't quite shaken. And this time, there was something. One small postcard. No return address. Postmarked from somewhere in Florida. The front showed a beach I didn't recognize. The back had only one sentence. "We saw the photos. You looked Happy. No name. But I knew the handwriting. Sharp. Deliberate. I didn't take it inside. I slid it into the woodpile under the porch. Some words weren't meant to stay warm. The next morning, sunlight broke through the snow-laced branches. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen before I even made it downstairs. Greg was already outside, helping clear the path to the driveway. Emily waved from the porch, wrapped in a scarf I hadn't seen in months. Someone had hung up a new string of pine cones and lights along the eaves. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Love had stopped asking for explanation. And finally, so had I. I used to think healing would come with a grand apology. A dramatic moment. A family reunion where someone finally saw the years I gave and said, "We were wrong." But it didn't come like that. It came slowly, quietly, through the sound of chairs scooting in around my new table, the kind of table where no one keeps score. It came in the way Greg's mom folded the quilt around her shoulders, like she'd always known it was there for her. It came in the way Emily looked at me, not like I needed fixing, but like I was already home. I've learned that letting go doesn't mean giving up on people. It means releasing your grip on who you wished they'd be, so you can hold on to what is. And in my case, what is enough. We still cook too much. Someone always forgets the salad. The stories repeat. The lights flicker. But when I hear the laughter, I know this life is real. Not perfect, but earned. And if you're sitting in your own version of silence right now, wondering if it'll ever make sense, trust this. You don't have to be invited back to a house that never made room for you. You can build a new one that welcomes you as you are. And sometimes, the quiet that comes after heartbreak is the sound of peace finally settling in. Family isn't always about who shares your name. It's about who shows up. When trust is broken or loyalty goes one way, it's okay to draw new boundaries. The people who make space for you, emotionally and literally, are the ones worth investing in. Letting go of toxic expectations doesn't mean you're bitter. It means you're brave enough to build a life based on truth, not obligation. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. Sometimes healing is simply choosing peace and finally feeling at home. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of something in your own life, consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We share real stories that heal, and you might just find one that feels like yours.